The galaxy had once been a place of peace and prosperity, where different species coexisted and shared knowledge. But now it was a war zone, a place where survival depended on strength and power. For centuries, the great Zorathian Empire had dominated the galaxy with their advanced technology, crushing every civilization that dared to challenge them. Their ships, enormous and almost invincible, blotted out the stars as they swept across systems, obliterating planets with their deadly weapons. No species was safe, and even the bravest warriors had lost all hope of standing against them. But there was a whisper, a rumor spreading through the shadows of the galaxy. An unknown species, small and seemingly insignificant, had appeared on the edge of known space. They were called humans. At first, no one took them seriously. After all, how could a species from a forgotten world, a planet so far from the galactic center, stand a chance against the Zorathians? Yet, as the war raged on, and hope seemed to disappear, the leaders of the remaining forces gathered in secret, debating whether to make contact with these humans. Desperation had driven them to take a risk they never would have considered in the past. The galaxy was crumbling. Entire systems had fallen. Planet after planet was reduced to rubble, and the once proud alliance of species had fractured. Now there was only a handful of worlds left that had not yet fallen under Zorathian control. The last council of the galaxy, made up of desperate leaders from the few surviving species, knew they had no choice but to try something different. They had lost everything except the faintest sliver of hope, the humans. An envoy, a small but determined fleet, was sent to Earth. Their mission was simple: find the humans, bring them into the war, and hope they could change the fate of the galaxy. The journey was long, and many of the council members feared it would be in vain. But they had no choice. As the envoy approached Earth, they wondered if they would find a species of warriors or a race too weak to even defend itself. They were unprepared for what they would discover. When the humans first made contact, the council was surprised. They were nothing like the Zorathians or any of the other species they had encountered. The humans did not arrive with grand fleets or overwhelming power. Instead, they brought something else: an unshakable will to survive. Their leaders, human men and women, spoke with fire in their eyes, a kind of passion and determination that the council had never seen before. They were not intimidated by the mighty Zorathian forces. Instead, they were resolute, offering their help in whatever way they could. The humans did not come with promises of victory or superweapons. They simply said they would fight. And fight they did. The first encounter between the human forces and the Zorathians came as a shock to both sides. The Zorathians, confident in their superiority, underestimated the humans. They expected easy victories, quick and decisive. But the humans did not fight like the Zorathians had expected. Instead of charging head-on, the humans used tactics no one had ever seen before: ambushes, traps, and ingenious strategies that played on the strengths of their small but determined forces. They were relentless, always finding a way to turn the tide even in the most hopeless of situations. The Zorathians, who had always relied on their overwhelming firepower, found themselves outwitted and outmatched in ways they could not comprehend. The galaxy began to take notice. The humans, though outnumbered and outgunned, showed the galaxy that strength was not just about weapons or technology. It was about willpower, determination, and the ability to adapt. Their victories were small at first, but each one sent a ripple of hope through the galaxy. Slowly, the human forces began to rally other species, bringing them into a growing alliance. The Zorathians, who had once believed themselves invincible, were forced to confront the reality that they might not win this war after all. The human strategy was simple. They focused on hitting the Zorathians where it hurt the most. They attacked supply lines, sabotaged weapon factories, and even infiltrated Zorathian strongholds. With each successful strike, the Zorathians began to lose their grip on the galaxy. The human fleet may have been small, but their tactics were sharp and unpredictable. What the humans lacked in numbers, They made up for in ingenuity and courage. As the war dragged on, the once dominant Zorathian Empire began to weaken. Their supply chains were stretched thin, their fleets disorganized. The alien races who had once cowered before them now saw a glimmer of hope. They too began to rise up, inspired by the humans' courage. For the first time in centuries, the Zorathians were not the ones who controlled the fate of the galaxy. It was the humans who held that power now, and with it, the possibility of a new future. But even as hope spread throughout the galaxy, there was still a deep sense of fear. The Zorathians were not defeated yet. They had one final card to play, a weapon so powerful that it could turn the tide of the war in an instant. This weapon, a super weapon capable of wiping out entire star systems, was the last trump card in their hand. The humans knew that if they failed to stop it, everything they had fought for would be lost. The race was on. The human forces, with their new allies, launched a daring mission to destroy the Zorathian superweapon before it could be deployed. Time was running out, and the stakes had never been higher. The fate of the galaxy rested in the hands of the humans and their allies, and though the odds were against them, there was a sense of something powerful growing, a shared belief that they could win, that they could overcome the impossible. With each passing day, the humans proved that they were more than just a last hope. They were the galaxy's greatest chance for survival. And as the final battle loomed on the horizon, there was no turning back. The war was not over, but the galaxy had found its saviors, and they were human. The galaxy had lost hope. The great Zorathian Empire, with its immense fleets and powerful weapons, seemed unstoppable. For centuries, they had crushed every civilization in their path, and the once thriving civilizations that dotted the galaxy were now shadows of their former selves. Star systems had fallen, entire planets wiped off the map, and nothing seemed capable of standing in their way. The galaxy's leaders, once proud and united, had fallen into disarray. Their forces were scattered, their morale broken. Each new attack by the Zorathians made the idea of victory seem more and more impossible. Then came the unexpected: humans. At first, the Galactic Council was skeptical. Earth was a small, distant world, tucked away on the fringes of known space. No one had ever heard of humans being anything more than a primitive species, struggling with their own internal conflicts. The Council had heard the rumors, of course, but how could a species so far removed from the galaxy's center even hope to make a difference? Yet, as the war dragged on, with hope rapidly disappearing, there was nothing left to lose. The final decision was made. The Council would contact Earth and seek whatever help the humans could offer, even if they were nothing more than a distraction to buy time for the other forces. When the humans finally made their entrance, they arrived not as invincible giants or galactic conquerors, but as something entirely unexpected. There were no massive fleets, no displays of overwhelming power, just a few small, nimble ships that appeared out of nowhere, their engines humming with quiet strength. The Zorathians had no idea what to make of them. These ships, though far smaller than their own, seemed to move with a purpose, dodging Zorathian patrols and catching them off guard at every turn. For a moment, the Zorathians thought it was a trick, a small fluke, but they soon realized that humans weren't here to play by the rules. The first communication from the humans was straightforward. Their leader, a woman named Captain Maria Hayes, spoke with a calm but fierce confidence. She did not bow to the Zorathians or beg for mercy, as so many others had. Instead, she declared that humanity was here not to ask for help, but to fight. The humans had seen enough destruction, enough suffering. They had nothing left to lose, and they were willing to do whatever it took to stop the Zorathian Empire. The message sent shockwaves across the galaxy. How could such a small, untested species speak with such certainty? The council members, now watching from their control rooms, could hardly believe what they were hearing. And yet, despite their doubts, something about the humans' resolve seemed to stir the galaxy's broken spirits. The humans didn't come to beg or plead. They came to fight. With their ships, They began to coordinate with the surviving forces of other species. But what was most striking was their approach to battle. The humans didn't rush into combat with flashy displays of strength, as the Zorathians did. Instead, they fought. The first battle with the Zorathians came quickly. A small Zorathian scout fleet had arrived to crush the last resistance on a nearby planet, and the humans, now coordinating with a small alliance of various species, decided to intercept them. No one expected much from the humans. The Zorathians, with their huge warships and advanced weaponry, had never lost a battle in centuries. The human ships, by comparison, were tiny, their weapons relatively weak. Yet, when the battle began, something remarkable happened. Instead of charging headfirst into the Zorathian lines, the humans used their ship's agility to slip past the larger vessels, dodging their weapons with uncanny precision. They didn't fight like the Zorathians, who relied on brute force. They fought with intelligence, using hit-and-run tactics that caught the Zorathians off guard. The first victory was small, but it was a victory nonetheless, and it sent a ripple through the galaxy. Could the humans actually have something the galaxy's leaders had overlooked for so long? Willpower and the ability to outthink their enemies. As the humans became more involved in the war, they began to show the galaxy how different their approach truly was. They didn't just fight. They inspired. Other species, once on the brink of despair, began to rally behind them. The Zorathians, who had once been invincible, now found themselves faced with an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. The human forces were unpredictable. One moment, they would be taking down a Zorathian weapons factory, and the next, they would be leading a guerrilla strike against a massive warship. They attacked from the shadows, striking swiftly and disappearing before the Zorathians could retaliate. The humans' ability to adapt and improvise seemed to give them an edge over the overconfident Zorathians. Yet, despite the early successes, the Zorathians were not willing to give up so easily. They quickly adapted to the humans' tactics, developing new strategies to counter their unpredictable attacks. They began sending larger fleets, focusing all their resources on crushing the humans. It seemed like the war was starting all over again, but the humans had learned. They didn't back down. They kept fighting, planning, and finding new ways to surprise their enemies. Every battle was different, every victory a reminder that the Zorathians were not the unstoppable force they once thought themselves to be. What truly set the humans apart, however, wasn't just their tactics. It was their leadership. Captain Maria Hayes, along with other human leaders, kept their forces united with an unwavering determination. She inspired those around her not just through speeches or promises of victory, but through action. She led from the front, always the first to charge into battle, and her unshakable courage became contagious. The humans didn't just fight for survival. They fought for each other, for the galaxy's future, and for a new hope that had long been forgotten. The Zorathians, frustrated by their inability to crush the humans, began to make mistakes. They underestimated their enemy, which was something no one had done for centuries. Every move the humans made was calculated, and with each new tactic they used, the galaxy's faith in them grew. The humans didn't just represent hope for the galaxy, they represented something more, a reminder that even in the darkest times, a spark of resistance could ignite a flame of change. And so, as the humans continued their fight, the Zorathians realized that the war had changed. It was no longer just about power, it was about survival, intelligence, and the will to keep going, no matter the odds. The humans had arrived, and they were not leaving until the galaxy had a chance at peace once more. The galaxy was a place of uncertainty. The once powerful resistance forces had been crushed under the weight of the Zorathian Empire's relentless advance. Whole star systems were wiped out, and planets fell without mercy. The galaxy's leaders were weary, their resolve broken. The threat from the Zorathians seemed unshakable. No one had expected anything from humanity, a small distant species with no history of galactic conquest. The humans were not powerful, nor were they famous for their advanced technology. Yet something within them had stirred the galaxy's remaining defenders. The humans had been the catalyst for change, showing the galaxy that victory was still possible. But even with the humans' arrival, the battle was far from won. The Zorathians still held the upper hand, and every skirmish ended with their superiority on full display. The humans had proved their worth by showing that they could fight in ways no one expected, using cunning and unexpected tactics. Yet, as the war raged on, the question remained, could the humans truly deliver a decisive blow against the overwhelming force of the Zorathian Empire? It seemed impossible, and yet, in the darkest hours, the humans were preparing for something far more ambitious than anyone could have predicted. They weren't just trying to survive anymore. They were preparing for the first major strike against the Zorathian war machine. The target was a Zorathian fleet, one of their largest and most dangerous. This fleet had been terrorizing a neighboring sector, crushing all opposition, and sending a clear message that no one could stand in the Zorathians' way. The fleet was led by a ruthless admiral known for his brutality. If this fleet wasn't stopped, it would be another crushing defeat for the galaxy, and the Zorathians would tighten their grip on the entire region. But the humans had a plan. It was risky, but it was their best chance. For the first time in the war, they had a chance to strike a real blow against the Zorathian Empire. Captain Maria Hayes had studied the fleet for weeks. She knew the Zorathians' tactics, their strengths, and their weaknesses. The Zorathians relied on overwhelming firepower, and their ships were enormous, bristling with weapons that could destroy entire planets. But the humans had a different approach. They didn't have the firepower to match the Zorathians head-on, but they had something the Zorathians lacked: speed, agility, and unpredictability. The human ships were smaller, faster, and far more maneuverable than the massive Zorathian vessels. Hayes had a plan, an audacious one that involved using the environment itself to their advantage. The plan was set in motion. The humans would not attack head-on. Instead, they would use the asteroids of a nearby field to hide their forces, allowing them to strike the Zorathian fleet when they least expected it. It was a daring move, but one that could give them the element of surprise. The humans would hit hard and fast, knowing that if they didn't strike quickly, the Zorathians would retaliate with overwhelming force. The entire mission hinged on timing and precision. One misstep, one wrong move, and it would be over before it even began. As the human ships entered the asteroid field, the tension was unbearable. The crew members knew the risks, but there was no turning back. Captain Hayes had given them a simple order: stick to the plan, and we win. They could hear the hum of their engines as they maneuvered among the floating rocks, their ships darting in and out of the debris, almost invisible in the shadows of the asteroids. The Zorathians were unaware, but the humans knew time was running out. Every moment brought the fleet closer to the battlefield, and with it, the possibility of failure. Finally, the Zorathian fleet appeared, slowly moving through the sector with its massive ships creating a wall of firepower. The humans waited, their breath held, as the seconds ticked by. Captain Hayes had one final command. Now, the human ships surged forward, bursting from behind the asteroids in a coordinated strike. The Zorathians never saw it coming. For the first few moments, chaos reigned. The human ships darted between the enormous Zorathian vessels, firing their weapons with pinpoint accuracy. Each shot was carefully aimed, targeting weak spots and vulnerabilities that the humans had identified in their weeks of preparation. The Zorathians were stunned. Their ships, though powerful, were not designed for this kind of combat. They were too slow, too bulky to respond quickly. The humans moved like shadows, slipping through their defenses and disabling critical systems. It wasn't long before the first Zorathian ship was taken down, then another, and another. Each victory sent shockwaves through the Zorathian fleet, and the humans pushed forward, refusing to back down. The Zorathian admiral, once so confident, was now in a panic. His fleet was crumbling under the human assault. His ships were too large to keep up with the human speed, and their tactics were catching him off guard. The Zorathians tried to regroup, to form a defense, but it was too late. The humans had already broken through their lines. It was the first real victory for the galaxy's resistance forces, and it was thanks to the humans' ingenuity, their courage, and their relentless determination. As the battle drew to a close, the Zorathians were forced to retreat. The human ships had inflicted serious damage, and the Zorathian fleet was left in disarray. It was a stunning victory, one that the galaxy had not seen in years. For the first time, the Zorathians had been dealt a blow they hadn't expected, and the humans had shown everyone that they were not to be underestimated. The news of the humans' victory spread quickly across the galaxy. There was no celebration, no grand speeches. The humans didn't fight for recognition. They fought for survival. But the victory was a turning point. It was proof that even in the face of overwhelming odds, there was still hope. The Zorathians were not invincible, and the humans had shown the galaxy that they could be defeated. For Captain Hayes and her crew, it was just the beginning. The victory was important, but it was only one battle in a much larger war. They knew that the Zorathians would retaliate, that the path ahead would be long and filled with even greater challenges. But for the first time, they believed in the possibility of victory. The humans had shown that they were not just a side note in the galaxy's history. They were a force to be reckoned with. The first major victory had been achieved, and it was only the beginning of what was to come. The war had dragged on for years, a battle that seemed endless, with no clear hope in sight. The Zorathian Empire, with its vast fleets and powerful technology, had swallowed entire star systems, crushing anyone who stood in their way. Their brutal expansion had spread across the galaxy, and the resistance forces, though brave, had been pushed to their limits. Victory had seemed out of reach, and the weight of despair hung heavily over the galaxy. But in the darkest of times, there had been whispers of something that could change everything. Something that could turn the tide of the war. That something was humanity. When the humans first arrived, no one had expected them to make a difference. They were small in number, technologically inferior to the Zorathians, and had no history of military conquest on a galactic scale. Yet, the humans were driven by something deeper than just survival. They had a fire within them, a determination to fight against all odds, and their relentless spirit had begun to inspire those around them. The galaxy's resistance forces had rallied behind them, unsure but hopeful. The humans were the last hope, the turning point the galaxy so desperately needed. Captain Elias Harper stood on the bridge of the human flagship, his eyes focused on the star map before him. The mission ahead was one of great risk, but it was their best chance to strike a decisive blow against the Zorathians. Their intelligence had confirmed that the Zorathian Empire was preparing a massive assault on one of the last free sectors of the galaxy, a sector that had resisted their control for years. This was it, the turning point. If the humans and the resistance forces could strike before the Zorathian fleet arrived, they could deal a blow that would shake the Empire to its core. But timing was everything. One mistake, and it would be a disaster. As the human fleet moved into position, tension filled the air. The plan was simple yet dangerous. They would use a hidden jump route to position themselves behind the Zorathian fleet, catching them off guard. The fleet would have no time to react, no time to regroup. They had to strike fast and hard before the Zorathians could bring their overwhelming firepower to bear. The humans had done the impossible before, but this time, the stakes were higher than ever. If they failed, the resistance would be crushed, and the galaxy would fall under Zorathian control. Elias paced back and forth, his mind racing. He knew that this battle would define the course of the war. The pressure was immense, but he couldn't afford to let fear take hold. His crew, the soldiers, and the allies, everyone was counting on them. If they succeeded, they would give the galaxy hope, a beacon of light in the darkness. If they failed, it would be the end of the resistance. Elias turned to his tactical officer, Lieutenant Zora Klein, who was staring intently at the monitors. "Status report," he asked, his voice steady despite the anxiety he felt inside. "We're almost in position, Captain," she replied, her eyes flicking from the screen to him. "The Zorathian fleet is still on course. If we stay hidden and don't make a sound, they won't detect us until we're too close." Elias nodded, though the weight of the plan hung heavy. If they weren't perfect, the entire mission could turn into a massacre. As the minutes passed, the human fleet crept closer, silently. Navigating the dark void of space, the stars seemed to stretch before them, the silence broken only by the hum of the ship's engines. Every second felt like an eternity. Then it came, the first sign that they were in position. Zara's voice broke through the quiet. "Captain, they're in range. It's time." The crew members on the bridge braced themselves. Elias took a deep breath, feeling the eyes of everyone on him. This was the moment they had been waiting for. With a single command, they were about to change the course of the war. "All ships, attack!" Elias shouted. The human fleet surged forward, the shockwave of their assault breaking the silence of space. They had waited for this moment for so long. The Zorathians, still unaware, didn't have time to respond. The human ships launched their first wave of fire, striking key areas of the Zorathian fleet. The Zorathians were stunned, their massive warships reeling from the unexpected attack. They tried to regroup, but it was too late. The humans' precision and speed were overwhelming. One by one, Zorathian ships fell, their shields failing under the force of the human strikes. The fleet's commanders scrambled to organize a defense, but the humans were already moving again, striking hard and fast, never giving the Zorathians a moment to recover. The battle raged on, and the resistance forces fought alongside the humans, each ship coordinated in their attack. Elias watched from the bridge as the tide of battle shifted before his eyes. The Zorathians were being pushed back, their once unshakable superiority beginning to crumble. The humans had caught them off guard, and they were relentless. Every strike counted, and every victory sent ripples of shock throughout the Zorathian ranks. The galaxy was seeing something it had never seen before: hope. For hours, the battle continued, with the humans pressing their advantage. As the Zorathians retreated, it became clear that this was the turning point the galaxy had been waiting for. The once unstoppable force of the Zorathians was no longer invincible. The resistance had found their strength, and it came in the form of humanity's courage, creativity, and willingness to fight when others would have given up. The Zorathian retreat was not without cost. The human fleet had suffered casualties, but the victory was undeniable. As the last of the Zorathian ships disappeared into the depths of space, Elias couldn't help but feel a sense of disbelief. They had done it. They had delivered the blow the galaxy so desperately needed. The turning point had come, and it was a victory they would remember forever. Elias turned to his crew, his heart swelling with pride. "We did it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "This is just the beginning. We've shown the galaxy that there is hope, that we can fight, that we can win." The crew cheered, their spirits lifted by the victory. But Elias knew that this was just the first step. The Zorathians would not give up easily. The war was far from over. But the galaxy now had something it had lacked for so long: hope. Hope that they could stand up against the Zorathian Empire. Hope that they could fight for a future, one where freedom and peace were possible. And that hope came from the humans, whose arrival had sparked a new dawn for the galaxy. As the human fleet moved into position to pursue the retreating Zorathians, Elias looked out at the stars, a new sense of determination in his eyes. The galaxy was not lost, not anymore. They had made their stand, and they had won. The turning point had arrived, and there was no going back. The war had ravaged the galaxy for years. Entire planets lay in ruins, their people crushed under the relentless march of the Zorathian Empire. The resistance, though brave, had been losing ground, unable to stop the overwhelming force of the enemy. The galaxy was divided, with some sectors falling to the might of the Zorathians, while others clung to the last shred of hope. But amid the devastation, there was a glimmer of something new, something unexpected. It came from an unlikely source: humanity. When humans had first arrived in the galaxy, they were nothing more than a curious presence, small in number and seemingly insignificant compared to the vast civilizations already established. But the humans, with their unique blend of determination and creativity, had proven themselves capable of more than anyone had anticipated. The galaxy had watched in awe as humanity's forces began to rise, challenging the Zorathian Empire in ways no one had thought possible. And now, with the tide of the war turning, the galaxy's hope rested in their hands. Captain Elias Harper stood on the bridge of the human flagship, staring out into the vast expanse of space. The battle was over, but the war was not yet won. The Zorathians had been pushed back, their fleets shattered, but they still controlled vast swaths of the galaxy. The humans and their allies had fought hard, but the true victory would only come when peace was finally achieved. The galaxy was tired of war, the countless lives lost, the endless suffering. It had to stop. And now, with the Zorathian Empire in retreat, the opportunity for peace was within reach. Elias turned to his first officer, Lieutenant Zora Klein, who was studying the communications array. "Any word from the other sectors?" he asked, his voice steady but filled with the weight of the moment. "Communication is active, Captain," Zara replied, her eyes scanning the data on her screen. "We've received confirmation from the Galactic Council. The Zorathians are willing to negotiate. They want a ceasefire." Elias' heart skipped a beat. The ceasefire was the first step, but the real challenge would be the peace talks. The Zorathians had never been known for diplomacy. They were a proud and ruthless empire, and their leaders would likely see these talks as a mere formality, a way to buy time and regroup. But Elias knew the stakes. If they could secure lasting peace, it would change the galaxy forever. The suffering would end, and the people could rebuild. The council had called for a summit, and both the human fleet and the Zorathian leadership were scheduled to meet on a neutral world, a planet untouched by the war. It was a bold move, but Elias understood that it was necessary. This was the moment to ensure that peace wasn't just a fleeting dream, but a reality. The galaxy needed it. The humans arrived at the neutral world first, their fleet hovering in orbit as they prepared for the meeting. Elias paced on the bridge, his mind racing with thoughts of the upcoming talks. The Zorathian delegation was expected to arrive at any moment. The tension in the air was palpable, and Elias could feel the weight of the decision that would soon be made. The future of the galaxy rested on these talks. If they failed, the war could restart, and everything the humans had fought for would be in vain. Finally, the Zorathian ships appeared on the horizon, sleek and imposing. The human ships stood ready, but there was no sign of hostility. The fleets remained at a distance, waiting for the peace talks to begin. Elias couldn't help but feel a sense of hope, a feeling he hadn't allowed himself in years. This was it, the moment when everything could change. The meeting took place on the surface of the neutral world, a lush planet with towering trees and wide open fields. The Zorathian representatives, tall and imposing, were led by their supreme general, a figure known for his cruelty and power. Across from them stood Elias and the human delegation, a mix of diplomats, military leaders, and allies from various resistance factions. The atmosphere was tense, but there was a sense of purpose in the air. The negotiations would be long and difficult, but everyone knew that this was their chance to end the war once and for all. The first few hours of talks were strained. The Zorathians, though they had agreed to a ceasefire, were unwilling to concede much. They were proud, and they viewed the humans' rise as a challenge to their dominance. But the human negotiators, led by Elias, remained patient. They had come prepared, with a clear vision for peace and a willingness to listen. Slowly, the tone of the talks began to shift. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when it seemed like the negotiations might fall apart. But Elias never gave up. He knew that if they could find common ground, if they could make the Zorathians see the cost of endless war, peace might be possible. As the day wore on, the Zorathians began to soften. They saw the resolve in the humans, the unity of the resistance forces, and the undeniable fact that the galaxy had grown tired of war. There were whispers among the Zorathian leaders, and their supreme general, once firm and unyielding, began to listen more closely. It wasn't an easy decision for him, but as the hours passed, he began to realize that the Zorathian Empire had lost its grip on the galaxy. The humans had shown them that they could not conquer by force alone. It was time to find another way. By the time the sun set on the peaceful planet, the talks had reached a turning point. The Zorathian representatives agreed to a treaty, one that would guarantee the freedom of the sectors they had once conquered. The war would end, and the galaxy would enter a new era, a time of rebuilding and healing. The Zorathians, though they would maintain a presence in certain regions, agreed to respect the sovereignty of the people they had once enslaved. In return, the humans and their allies would help them stabilize their empire, ensuring that the peace was not just a temporary ceasefire, but a lasting resolution. Elias stood on the balcony of the meeting hall, looking out over the peaceful landscape. It was hard to believe that just a few short years ago, this planet had been a symbol of everything that had been lost. Now, it was a symbol of what had been gained. Peace was not just a dream anymore. It was a reality. The galaxy was no longer on the brink of destruction. The war was over, and a new era had begun. There would be challenges ahead, of course. The scars of war would take time to heal, and not everyone would accept the terms of peace. But the most important thing was that the fighting had stopped. The galaxy had found its way back to hope, and that hope came from the unlikeliest of places, the humans, who had shown the galaxy that even in the darkest times, peace was possible. As Elias turned away from the balcony and walked back into the hall, he knew that this was just the beginning. The galaxy had a long road ahead, but the future was bright. A new era of peace had begun, and it was humanity that had helped lead the way.